It's this time of the day again. Time to talk about a really cool concept, an idea that would elevate Warhammer 40k setting and make it deeper and more interesting, and how Games Workshop downright ignores it. That's right, my dear viewers and listeners. Time to talk about Chaos Xenos. A concept that remains, for the most part, unexplored by Games Workshop and Black Library writers. Which is a shame, for it makes the Milky Way galaxy feel totally humanocentric. As if Terra and the rotting corpse on the Golden Throne were the center of the universe. I mean, I know that GW thinks that way, but that just restricts the potential of a setting. Call me crazy for asking for something else than the damn Space Marines. I want to know about different alien cultures that were corrupted by the Dark Gods, about Xenos that fell into damnation for the sake of power, revenge, or it was the price for their own curiosity. And today I want to share with you my thoughts on the subject. But before we begin, remember to like, comment, subscribe, ring the bell, the whole shtick. You know what to do. If you can, support me through Patreon. Or, if you be so kind, donate to the art budget through Ko-fi, where I gather funds for the Star Wars x Warhammer 40k series. We already reached the goal, but frankly, the more funds I have, the more art pieces I can commission. So please, drop $1 or $2 to ensure that our great gallery expands. Remember, it's thanks to your donations this series has its own art gallery, free of AI slop. With that out of the way, let's begin. Let's start with a curious detail in Warhammer 40k. Not everyone realizes this, but there is an important distinction to be made. Chaos Xenos are not the same as the Xenos who work with chaos. The best example that comes to my mind are the Loxatl. These amphibian, lizard-like Xenos are absolutely terrifying in both melee and ranged combat. They appear regularly in the Gaunt's Ghost series, which cover the events of a Sabbath Worlds Crusade. Great book series, by the way. There they serve as mercenaries and auxiliaries for the Blood Pact and the Sons of Sek. And yet, despite their extremely close cooperation with Chaos forces and their constant proximity to individuals blessed by the ruinous powers, the Loxatl themselves are neither worshippers of the Dark Gods nor visibly corrupted by Chaos. In fact, they appear to be strangely resistant to it. We don't see Loxatl with mutations or so-called gifts from the Chaos Gods. They don't fight for their favor, but for loot and resources. Which is surprising, because usually, if you work this closely with servants of the Dark Gods, those cancers on reality tend to notice you and whisper into your ear. But not in this case. For the most part, they seem unbothered by chaos influence. Now, don't get me wrong, they do fear those who are blessed by the Dark Gods, and they aren't immune to psychic powers, so they aren't blanks. But for whatever reason, chaos simply doesn't seem to take hold of them. Which, naturally, leads to an obvious question. If you aren't corrupted by chaos and the dark gods don't seem interested in you, why work with chaos at all? The answer is painfully simple. Hatred. The majority of alien species that side alongside chaos forces seem to share one thing in common: a deep, burning hatred of the Imperium. In case of Loxatl, no one knows exactly why they despise the Imperium enough to ally themselves with literal forces of darkness. Their origins are unknown, and they don't appear to possess their own spacecraft, relying on others for transportation. Some theorize that the Imperium destroyed their homeworld, and thanks to its legendary bureaucratic incompetence, simply forgot it ever happened. This would explain why the Inquisition has repeatedly failed to locate their home system. We see something similar with the Tarelians. The Imperium wiped out their civilization. Some survivors eventually found refuge within the Tau Empire, where they were given new colonies and a chance to rebuild. Others, however, chose a darker path, allying themselves with chaos, driven by unrelenting hatred toward humanity. Another notable example are the Strixes, a race of backstabbing Xenos traders who are more than happy to deal with, betray, and exploit almost anyone they encounter, including forces of chaos, with the exception of the Eldar, who they hate with a passion. Which brings us neatly to the next topic: Chaos Eldar. Because yes, they do exist. And their very existence is something of a paradox. Slaanesh claims all Eldar souls and eternally hungers to devour them. Yet, at the same time, Eldar possesses immense psychic potential, making their souls incredibly valuable to all Chaos Gods. However, as interesting as the idea of Chaos Eldar is, they are rare. Very rare. When Slaanesh was born and the Eye of Terror consumed the core of the Eldar Empire, not all Eldar were devoured by the new god immediately. Many were instead corrupted and mutated beyond recognition, and some of them still endure on the shattered Crown Worlds, the remnants of the ancient Eldar Empire. Some of these mutated Eldar survive as true champions of chaos, impossibly old, impossibly mad, and sharing almost nothing with the rest of their species. Later instances of corruption have also been recorded. Clan Siltak, for example, fell to Nurgle, transforming into grotesque, insect-like abominations that now operate as warped Chaos Corsairs in the service of a grandfather. Other examples can be found among the Drukhari. In the Path of the Dark Eldar, we see several Dark Eldar who fell to the ruinous powers, usually manifested through horrific physical mutations. Personally, I find the concept of Chaos Eldar fascinating. Beings twisted beyond recognition, shattered, warped reflection of a once beautiful and proud species. Imagine the narrative potential of Eldar being forced to confront their corrupted kin, their forms ruined, yet still painfully recognizable. Or consider ancient Chaos champions, mutated prophets of the dark gods, who have endured since the fall of Eldar, or even before it. Creatures with tens of thousands of years of experience, Primarch-level threats, capable of leading armies of warped abominations, human and Xenos alike. Now, speaking of Chaos Xenos more broadly, we should look at the few known examples. The list is depressingly short. Lear, the Serpent Xenos exterminated during the Great Crusade by the Emperor's children, whose artifacts played a significant role in that legion's corruption. Yuvat and Baal Childar, both native to Calix's sector, were either wiped out or brought to the brink of extinction during Angevin Crusade, with Yuvat possibly persisting in the far reaches of the sector. Zenarak, seemingly wiped out by the Black Templars toward the end of the 41st millennium. Saruti, corrupted by the forbidden knowledge, and ultimately brought low by the actions of a certain Inquisitor. Now, I don't know if you've noticed the pattern here. Every single one of these species was either wiped out by the Imperium or driven to the very edge of extinction and forced into hiding. And look, I could spend time diving into every scrap of lore about these Xenos. But honestly, there isn't much to work with. We know they worshipped chaos, wielded bizarre technology, were hostile to humanity, and faced extermination. That's about it. Frankly, trying to dissect every fragment of information would just waste everyone's time. Besides, the only truly interesting species on that list are the Saruti, and I have no intention of spoiling their appearance in the Eisenhorn trilogy. Nothing I say here could do them justice. If you haven't already, go read or listen to Eisenhorn, and if you have, you know exactly what I'm talking about. But coming back to the main point. The facts are simple. For whatever reason, Games Workshop and Black Library have a habit of wiping out any Chaos Xenos they introduce. We know they exist, or existed, and almost nothing beyond that. They are either an ancient threat that is in hiding, or they are nothing more than a memory. Which leads me to one of two conclusions. Either Games Workshop is allergic to creativity and diversity when it comes to galactic threats, or they are afraid that cool Chaos Xenos would overshadow the overused Chaos Space Marines, whom we've seen 1,000 times already. And that, honestly, pisses me off to no end. If you couldn't guess from my love of a Tau, I adore small, unassuming xenofactions, the minor powers of the galaxy. We are constantly told that the Imperium is spread impossibly thin, fighting thousands of minor Xenos empires, rebel states, and chaos-corrupted regions. Yet, we only ever see a fraction of that. Wouldn't it be interesting to actually see some of those threats? Hell, wouldn't it be even more interesting if some of them were created by the Imperium itself? Remember the Tarelians I've mentioned earlier? the ones who allied with Chaos after the Imperium destroyed their civilization? That alone is a fertile ground for incredible storytelling, the Imperium being forced to confront the consequences of their own actions. Imagine this. A young Inquisitor takes part in a crusade that wipes out a Xenos civilization. It's just another operation, another name crossed off the list. Centuries later, remnants of that same species return, empowered by the Dark Gods, far more vicious and dangerous than ever before. The very same Inquisitor, now an old man worn down by age and duty, watches in despair as an entire subsector burns, knowing full well that this is the legacy of his earlier actions. But of course, we won't get that, because we need another Space Marine story. Honestly, it's exhausting. So much narrative potential completely wasted. And the problem doesn't stop there. Take the Tau Empire, not the Tau themselves. They seem about as close to Chaos Immune as you can get without being blanks. But what about the rest of their Commonwealth? The Nikasar are a psychic species, yet we never heard of even one of them falling to chaos. There are only vague rumors of Krut who became corrupted after consuming tainted flesh. And then there is the fourth sphere of expansion. An entire fleet gets thrown into the warp. Most of it is devoured by demons. Fair enough, but we hear nothing about survivors being corrupted by chaos. Not a single confirmed example. Not one mutant. Not one apostate. Not one soul who looked into the abyss and blinked. I know they were technically saved by the goddess Tauva, but come on, really? Not even an attempt at a story where the Tau have to deal with some of their allies becoming servants of the Dark Gods? That feels like a bare minimum, and yet, apparently, even that was too much to ask for. And believe me, I could go on like this for hours. There is no shortage of wasted potential. Hell, I haven't even mentioned the species that are suspected of chaos corruption, but never confirmed. The Crave and the Ragdoll. The Crave are an ancient, nomadic psychic species capable of enslaving entire planetary populations and feeding on them. The Ragdoll, on the other hand, appear to be non-psychic, grotesque, brutal entities that infest the Halo stars. Both are fascinating, both are terrifying, and both have an enormous amount of narrative potential. Yet they are criminally underutilized. Most of the time they exist only as a distant, eldritch horrors. And even that is rare, which is a damn shame, because when these kinds of Xenos do show up, they have massive impact on the setting. And that's exactly why it feels like such a crime that we barely see them at all. Once again, take the example of Saruti. The first time we encounter them, what Chaos knowledge did to them what it allowed them to become, and what it enabled them to create. It's genuinely eldritch. And that's an important point. Xenos don't think like humans. They don't perceive reality the same way we do. Their minds, cultures, and even their souls operate on entirely different principles. So when chaos touches them, the result isn't just humans but with spikes. The forms of corruption and mutation they suffer are fundamentally different. You can see how the alien nature of their souls shaped their transformation, or in some cases, how it allowed them to wield the powers of the ruinous powers without being corrupted in the same way humans are. That's what makes Chaos Xenos so fascinating. Yet the only explanation we are ever given for why they are so rare is depressingly simple. Either the Imperium wiped them out, or they isolated themselves from the rest of the galaxy. And that feels like a coward's way out. It's a simplistic answer to a complex question, and a deeply unsatisfying one. But with Games Workshop's overwhelmingly humanocentric narrative, we shouldn't expect anything else. Chaos Xenos, as interesting as they are as a concept, are destined to remain distant, shadowy threats. Unexplored, unexplained, forgotten. Much to the frustration of the fans who care about more than just the fate of humanity in the grim darkness of a far future. And that's basically all I have to say. A shorter video than usual, but then again, there isn't that much to talk about, seeing that Games Workshop genocided the subjects of a discussion. I could waste everyone's time by reading 40k wiki, but that seemed unproductive. Still, I hope this little rant was to your liking. If it was, do click the like button, comment, subscribe, and ring that bell. If you can, support me through Patreon or donate to the art budget through Ko-fi for the Star Wars x Warhammer 40k series. I will get to writing script for episode 14 as soon as I'm done with this video. I hope you will enjoy what I have planned. But I think that's it for today. Thank you for joining me, and I hope you enjoyed. Now, my dear viewers and listeners, remember, wherever you are, whatever you do, try to enjoy yourself while you can. I wish you most heretical day. Ta-ta!